Hi, this is Paul Frields, one of the hosts of the Practical Bass Show. And before the show starts in earnest, I just wanted to let you know whether you're a current listener, a longtime listener, or just starting the show, there's some valuable information at the end. So I hope you'll listen through to that and pick up on some news and some tips at the end of the show on how you can get involved in the Practical Bass community, and also how you can maybe give back to the bass community, and also some feedback to us, the show creators, on the work that we've done so far. So I hope that you'll stick around and give a listen there and pay attention to the note, and hopefully we will hear from you very soon. In the meantime, let's start the show.
Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields, and welcome to Practical Bass, where each week my co-host Dave Guzman and I take a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we kind of dissect it, look at it from a bunch of different angles, and offer a bit of our experience and advice to help elevate your gigs and gear to the next level. All throughout 2017, we've been looking at all sorts of issues, from being better organized to how to run different pieces of gear like a compressor or a DI box, to choosing your equipment and choosing the strategies that you use for equipment, things like how you set up your sound, how you can travel lighter, looking at a lot of the issues that each of us as a bass player faces for every rehearsal and every gig that we do, and trying to offer some sanity around that and some ways to cut through the noise that you hear constantly on the internet. We've tried to do that throughout 2017. We've had about 36 or so episodes to kind of take you through our thoughts on a lot of these topics. And I thought maybe we'd spend a little bit of time looking back at some of the episodes that Dave and I really enjoyed making, some of the ones where we learned a little bit ourselves, and hopefully could pass on some nuggets of wisdom to the rest of the bass community. I thought maybe I'd start by looking at one of my favorite episodes, and Dave's as well, which was about how to use a compressor. The episode came out of Dave basically he had recently gone through the process of buying a compressor pedal and was looking for some clarity around all the factors that are involved with compression, how to run the thing, once you've got it, what to be looking for in terms of features, and how to basically integrate that into your setup. And let's listen back to that episode and hear a little bit about our discussion. That's all I got. It's all I got, Dave. Oh my God. But a lot of pedals and units like the one that you just got, right, or the MXR that I used to have, or my Mark based pedal that I have now, they've got multiple controls. Yep. Right. And so you mentioned a few of the controls on yours. One of those is threshold. Right. And threshold, basically, think about that as the level of volume that it takes for the compressor to decide to turn on, right? Like the threshold is where the compressor is going to start working. Like until the signal gets above that level, the compressor is not going to do anything. Yep. Right. So if you turn the threshold very far up, and remember, when we talk about threshold, we're basically talking about from 0 dB, which is as loud as things can get in terms of that signal, right, downward. Right. So everything's on goes minus from there. So like you'll have -5, -10, -20 dB. Right. Right. Okay. 0 is as far as you can go, because that's all. That means all the way. Right.
There is no 11 on this dial.
There is no 11. That's right. There's no +1. Right. So at least there's not with a lot of them. But so as you turn that threshold down, what you're saying is you want the trigger to come earlier and earlier in that signal, right?
On like the volume level.
Yeah. So the volume doesn't have to come up quite as much for the compressor to start, right?
Okay.
So you want to pick that, because maybe you don't want to compress things that are very, very low volume, but what you do want to do is you want to grab things that are just really out of control.
So if you set it at 0, then you're not really compressing much.
That's pretty much the case.
There's very little squash.
Yeah, if you set it to 0, the compressor will probably never turn on.
Okay, I got you.
Point.
Right.
So then you turn it down to taste.
Yep.
Right. So so it's also affected by how loud your bass is to start with. Right, is going to determine where you set that threshold. So you have to use your ear a little bit And sometimes the compressors will have like an indicator light on them or a meter of some sort.
Yep.
And you can also look at that, right? So you're going to be watching that throughout as you play with it to see, is it turning on or not? Sometimes it's just one light, and sometimes you get like a whole meter of lights.
Okay.
So then you've got another setting, which is important, called ratio. And I think for yours, it's called slope.
That's right.
And what the ratio means is how much should the compressor clamp down on that volume after you pass the threshold, right? And it's a ratio. And so what it means is if that ratio is all the way off, like some compressors, they'll let you turn the ratio all the way down to 1, which is the lowest, which means 1-to-1, which means it's not compressing anything.
Right.
Just like having the threshold to 0, it means basically you're not doing anything.
Okay.
As you turn the ratio up, it changes the rate at which the signal has to go up in order for the compressor to allow it to go up a set amount. So let me see if I can, that sounds really weird, but let me see if I can paint
We're getting
the
there.
picture.
Yeah, we're zeroing in. I can feel the plane like circling around.
It's coming there. Going to bring it in for a landing.
Because there is an infinity sign in there.
There is an infinity
We did
sign,
ultimately bring that plane in for a landing, and we talked about some of the other controls that you can find on full-featured compressors. And I invite you to go look that up in our archives. I believe that was episode 12. We also did an episode right after that on broadening genres. So it shows you how we kind of skip around in this podcast from topics that are gear related to topics that are maybe a little more concept related or practice related and more about how you develop as a player. So let's listen into a bit of our conversation on broadening genres.
I feel like there's a few pieces that it adds value to. And one is, if you're really looking at a specific genre, let's say that you're playing, a certain area of funk, and if I dive into it and if I really explore it and I really learn, I get deeper into it. When I'm at the gig or if I'm at the recording session or if I'm, just playing with musicians, I feel like if I know that genre deeper, I'm avoiding the whole like fake it till you make it thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to go that route, but if someone calls out a genre or says, this is what I'm looking for in this song, and to be able to have that in your back pocket, like,
Right.
Okay, it's not just like the 1-5, but there are other things that I can do with this.
Right.
I think that's one of the bigger values. It just becomes more believable, and you can, add to that. Now, on the other side of that is that if you're writing bass lines, I feel like it'll really help you fuse different styles and genres that maybe weren't even supposed to be, they're just so far apart from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you can do it delicately, because if you know the genre well enough, sort of those tiny little things that make it that style.
Right.
And you could just peel apart little pieces and then add it in.
Yeah.
And that creates sort of like a somewhat of like a juxtaposition in terms of style and texture, almost like genre bending. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to drop names or anything, but so there was a group that I was working with some years ago, before they moved to Nashville, the Hummingbirds, and there was a song that they were working on at the time. I honestly can't remember the title, but I really enjoyed the song.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that the drummer and I, at one point, were working on building up an arrangement.
Right.
And we had kind of this feel that, when they brought it in, it was very, straight ahead kind of acoustic folk.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I don't know, like Graham Parsons kind of thing. And
Yep.
we sort of brought in this, it was almost like kind of a bossa nova feel, not over the top, like straight, in the genre, but just there was a certain inflection to the way that we played through the bar.
Yep.
And completely changed the way that everyone was executing the song and just gave it just a little lift. It wasn't anything that we planned, but being able to call on that difference just sort of like it lifted it up and it made it unique. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just another, straight ahead
acoustic folk. It was like there was a difference to it, and it was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, because when you from a listener,
so that was a little bit from our episode number 13, which was about broadening genres. Dave and I have also done some episodes that, rather than focusing on some positive advice about what to do or how to use gear, sometimes we've talked about maybe some prescriptive advice. So, maybe things not to do or things to avoid. And a good example of that is our episode number 15, which was about stage behaviors that we've both seen bands practice on stage that kind of detract from the show. And also sometimes experienced ourselves or even engaged in ourselves and kind of grown out of as we've learned more about how to be performers. And so I'm going to pass on a little bit of that. Here's a couple excerpts from our episode number 15 on 10 stage mistakes to avoid. That's how people know we've got that was number one.
Yeah, I love it.
Point number one.
So tell me, what was your, what was a big habit that you had to break on stage?
Probably if this was Family Feud, I'm pretty sure that between you and me,
right,
these would literally be the top answers where they're like, survey says, bing,
ding.
And the board turns over. You have one of them.
Yep.
I don't know whether it's number one or number two, but you're one of them.
Right.
Mine is the other one. Noodling. Noodling on stage.
The noodling.
Right? Where you get on stage and in between, whether it's, you're getting ready to play or sound check is done or whatever,
yep,
or you're God forbid, in between songs.
Right.
I know I was guilty of that.
Right.
Being on stage and fooling around, just playing notes that everybody else can hear.
Yeah.
There's no need for them to.
Yep.
Right. This is definitely one of those things that you can always separate the professionals
right
from the amateurs and below, is that, when you go on stage, you're playing at sound check.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
You're doing just enough to make sure you get your sound dialed in the way that it should be.
Yep.
And, maybe you're working with somebody in your band who's the sound man. Maybe you're working with a professional sound man. Hopefully you're at some gigs where you're able to do that and kind of experience that. But, you're working on their time as well. And so you need to be present and doing the things that you need to for, that sound man. So, yeah. But then when you're done, as far as a pet peeve, what's our point number 4 of behaviors to avoid?
Yeah, I think I think it's the stage banter excessively.
So
there's an art to it.
Yeah.
This whole thing, which I could never, I'm not great at it. Right. But there is this thing about being on stage and telling side jokes sometimes that just include the band only, right? There's inside jokes that sometimes musicians will tell each other.
Yeah.
The rest of the audience shouldn't understand what that was.
Right.
Whatever that joke is, blase blah, nobody understands what blase blah is.
You're hearkening back to the thing that happened in the van last night on the way to the venue.
Nobody cares, nobody knows, it has no impact. And then you have the side jokes and the whole thing of speaking off of the mic. So and
point number 5, and I can remember this well as from my past also, which is undercutting the team, right? Music is like I said, it's a conversation. Yep. It's also teamwork, right? The band is a team, the ensemble is a team.
Yeah.
And the audience ought to see nothing but unity between the folks who are on stage. And so, absolutely one of the worst behaviors that you'll see is a band where people are grumbling at each other, dirty looks, they're making comments about each other. And again, in a bigger venue, you may not be able to catch all of that, but there's a vibe that comes from it.
Right.
And again, what we're talking about is at the levels below those big stages where you're trying to work your way up and be a professional that people are going to call again, right? You definitely don't want to be in the situation where you are giving back negative vibes
to the people that you're working with, even if like it's a gig that you turn out to like, it turns out to be terrible. Like you show up, everything's wrong. Everything has gone wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you've had a bad day with your significant other or spouse or whatever, or at your job, if you work a day job, you might be bringing that with you. There might be things that have gone wrong in the prep. Somebody might have ticked you off in the band, or, maybe they're not treating you well. But the thing is, you never profit by taking the low road, right? So like taking the high road and just don't contribute to any sort of negative vibe like that. Just, it's a team. If something happens, smile and shake it off and realize, you know what, in the grand cosmos, it's meaningless. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk a lot about the grand scheme of things on Practical Bass. I think if you've listened for a while, you know that Dave and I like to talk small but think big. So we try and concentrate on details, and maybe through that help you have a bigger career. Here's an excerpt from our episode on traveling light. Dave and I really enjoy being bass players nowadays and not having the heaviest gear anymore unless you really choose to. That's really fantastic. And this is an episode where we talked about really a lot of the benefits of traveling light, also some of the drawbacks, but concentrating on maybe the pro side, here is where we were talking about some of those benefits. Let's listen in. So sorry. So I broke in about the mono bags, but you asked about like what are some of the benefits?
Like what do we get out of traveling light?
I mean, honestly, one thing that I love is I just love the fact that I can drive my little car, my own car. Right now, I have a boring car. I mean, there are going to be people out there going to laugh at me, but I'm a mid-sized sedan guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thing. Hey, I'm not going to lie. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. Occasionally we're out doing family stuff, and I love having a van and stuff that I can get all the band gear in.
Yep.
But let me tell you, if I don't have to drive that thing and I can drive my little sports sedan,
it's huge.
I love that.
Yeah.
So just being able to throw my cabinet in the trunk and my bass in the back seat with a couple items in the back and then take off. Oh, it's the best. Because I like driving. I honestly like it. And I like driving my car. And so not having to drive like the big behemoth van is just, it just adds a little bit of luxury and comfort to going to the gig and coming back from the gig.
Right. There's actually a commercial in there, like traveling light, and the guy loads his car in.
Does it have Matthew McConaughey in it?
Yeah, of course it has Matthew McConaughey. All right. And then you just drive west.
Yeah.
And you never stop.
Yeah.
You pass the gig, you just keep driving.
And suddenly I was in Seattle. I don't know what happened, honey, but that's where I am right now.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I like that.
Yeah.
I don't have to remember so much. Like
right.
I know I came in with the following 4 or 5 things. I leave with those 4 or 5 things.
Right. Quick cleanup.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And if it's a gig where if I'm just coming in and kind of doing my thing, I'm not like, hey, it's not my band or whatever. Like I'm coming in and do my thing. Like I can,
right.
After I get done, checking with the MD or checking with whoever's in charge, just, whether it's collecting pay or just, exchanging numbers or doing whatever I need to do.
Right.
So, sometimes there's like the meet and greets that you do afterwards. On the other hand, there's some gigs where you don't do that. Like you are supposed to kind of fade away.
Yeah.
And being able to just do that quickly, get your stuff together and get out is great.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. What about you? I mean, what are the benefits that you kind of internalize and
I think, definitely, I mean, there's a part of it that just straight up just feeds my obsession to minimize. Like
you said it was a sickness.
It's a little bit of a sickness. It's definitely therapeutic for me, but putting that aside, like I really feel like what it does is it helps simplify the like on the front end, it helps simplify the load in, and it helps keep my mind clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I know I've got A, B, C, D, and E to do. It's the same thing that, that's in my gig bag. I do, these certain steps, and that's all I have to focus on, which allows me time to put focus on putting out possibly any fires, for the band. If there's things that kind of pop up, maybe doing sound check or whatever, maybe helping my bandmates load in their stuff.
Yeah. Like you're not spending a huge amount of time worrying about, all these extraneous pieces. So, you're like one load and you're done. And then you come out and like, hey, I can help you with your drums.
Yeah. I load in, set up, boom. Maybe the manager of wherever, like somebody needs to work with the manager. I can be that person.
Yeah.
I can be helpful there.
Right.
Or maybe just talking with like, the crowd or the fans, I guess would be, the people that came to see the band. It gives me time to do that. But even if not, if for none of those other things, then it gives me time just to like settle in to the gig.
Yeah.
Versus like figuring out all the gear stuff.
Right.
Right.
Or bringing like 5 loads of stuff in and now you're all like sweaty.
And you're
something.
Right. Did you bring a change of clothes also? All that, and then of course, hey, it's good for the environment. You can carpool.
That's right. Yeah.
You can bring a friend.
Hey, you do want to be earth friendly. So
that's right.
Kind of tooling over to somebody's house and you grab 1 or 2 other guys and their small bits of gear.
Right.
It's great when you can do that.
That's right.
So hopefully this has given you a little taste of what Practical Bass has to offer. We do pride ourselves on bringing some good advice and some objective viewpoints on how to bring your best self, to bring your best knowledge and your best skills to every gig, and to know how to tame your gear and make it useful for whatever gigs and rehearsals that you need to do as a working bass player. I hope you've enjoyed this little retrospective. On behalf of my co-host Dave Guzman and myself, I really want to thank you for listening. I hope that you will check out the website if you haven't already done that at practicalbass.com. We also have a Facebook group. And if you just look for Practical Bass, you can find us there and join up with a bunch of other bass players who are getting into the swing of these podcasts and a really helpful community that's all about boosting each other up and offering each other good advice, asking questions, getting answers. We hope to see you there. And if you have suggestions for topics, we would love to hear them. We are getting a roster ready for the 2018 season of Practical Bass, and we would love to have your input on it. The best way to do that is to get in touch with us on our Facebook group. And you can also email us directly if you need to at podcast@practicalbass.com. Dave and I do read that email. We don't necessarily get a chance to respond to everything right away, but we will see your email, and we do try and get back to everybody as soon as time allows. So we encourage you to get back to us there. And the best thing you can do is really to subscribe and to share this podcast. You can subscribe just by going to the links that we offer at our practicalbass.com website. There's a subscribe link, just hit it and it gives you instructions for every platform, whether you're on Windows or Mac OS or an Apple iOS device or an Android device. We've got instructions for everybody that are very easy to follow. And we also hope that you'll share this with your fellow bass players and even other musicians. We don't cover topics that are always 100% exclusive to bass players. And so if you find a podcast that you think someone else could benefit from listening to, please do pass it on to them and share these with the groups that you're a part of. Share them on social media. It's a good way to help us keep going into the new year. This marks the end of the 2017 season for Practical Bass. We will return in 2018 in the spring with a brand new set of episodes, and we really look forward to talking with you then. Until then, I hope that you have wonderful gigs and that you have the best gear that Santa can bring you over the holidays, and we'll talk to you next time. So on behalf of Dave and myself, keep it low.